Hello, Horror Hounds. I think it's probably fair to say that the 90s were a troublesome decade for slasher movies. For the first half of the 90s, the really heavy hitters were running out of steam and falling back on gimmicks, many of them going into space or becoming cartoony or utilising 3D. And there were an awful lot of mix and match pretenders to the crown trying to find gimmicks of their own to get a little bit of that Freddy, Jason and Michael money while it was still around. And the train was losing steam, it was losing momentum, it's fair to say. Then in 1996, Scream came along and it was like a breath of fresh air, but I think it's also fair to say the unintended consequence of Scream was that for the second half of the 90s, our slasher movies were now almost de facto populated by young, beautiful Dawson's Creek meets 90210 models of perfection who were also wise asses, always ready with witty banter, one-liners and metatextual pop culture references. Today's movie comes right at the tipping point. It is 1995's direct-to-DVD Sleepstalker, The Sandman's Last Rites, it's also sometimes known as. And this, my friends, is the absolute epitome of bottom of the barrel scraping, splinters under your fingernails, trying to capture some of that Freddy magic for the horror crowd, coming up with one final new twist, one thing that hasn't been done yet that we can maybe just sell to this horror crowd. It's Sleepstalker, folks. Let me just read off the back of the DVD to bring you bang up to speed. And some of this will sound awfully familiar. Don't worry, I think that's by design. A young boy Griffin witnesses the slaughter of his parents at the hands of a serial killer dubbed the Sandman. Years later, Griffin is now a young man at peace, knowing that the murderer, who has spent the last years languishing on death row, is about to die. At the very moment of the Sandman's execution, evil is reborn as he becomes the malevolent Sleepstalker. Freed from his mortal chains and capable of unimaginable powers, he sets off to finish the job he started years ago, to kill Griffin. If you haven't seen Sleepstalker, trust me, you have seen Sleepstalker. You've got the kid who's now grown up, whose family was killed by the serial killer, and the serial killer's back to get him. You've got the voodoo priest that has some connection to the serial killer that gives him his supernatural powers. You've got the serial killer that has a gimmick, in this case the Sandman, and he leaves sand in the eyes of his victims. You've got the serial killer who at the point of execution transcends death and becomes a supernatural killing machine. Whilst you're watching this film, you will be reminded of, and I jotted the list down while I was watching it, you will be reminded of A Nightmare on Elm Street, Dust Devil, Child's Play, Candyman, Shocker, the horror show known as House 3 in the UK, and Argento's Deep Red, Profondo Rosso. Not this film's fault, I will grant you, but you will also think of Spider-Man 3 and the Sandman in Spider-Man 3, which came out many years later. But when you've got a character that's made out of sand, he's swimming in a very, very shallow pool, and he's gonna, given the fact that you've then, a few years later, got another character made completely out of sand, they're gonna keep knocking into one another. Now, to be fair, this one's straight to DVD. It doesn't have the budget that Sam Raimi had to bring his comic book Sandman to life. And I'll be honest with you, with what they've got to work with, they actually do really well with this Sandman. The makeup looks great. That's a sort of artist's impression of it. It does look good. Even his coat and his clothes, they almost look like sandpaper. They look like they're made out of sand. They look rough and ready. There are a couple of very cheap, very early in the days of CGI effects. We can forgive that. They don't have access to the SFX that people do these days. There are an awful lot of shots of sand being poured through things, played backwards or forwards or in slow motion to be him travelling in sand form. And do you know what? In a pinch, that works. In some shots, it works really well. They use it to absolute death because it's the cheapest and easiest way that they've got to represent their guy. So that effect gets used over and over and over again. But I can't tell you that the killer looks bad or acts bad, because he doesn't. There's potential there. None of the actors don't deliver. They all give it their absolute best. It's just that this, from behind the camera, from the script, from the direction, seems so cynical. It seems like it's almost designed purely to try and tap into the things that work in so many other successful franchises, that it never settles down into its own thing. Oh, here's the voodoo thing from Child's Play. Here's the Freddy-esque sort of supernatural killer that turns up at night. Here are some sand-themed deaths that you've seen done in Wishmaster before. Here's the killer that on death row, this time in the gas chamber. In Shocker it was the electric chair. I can't remember what it was in the horror show. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. You see the killer's execution, and then you see them resurrected. Even the resurrection scene, when he goes from human to made out of sand, it's very stylishly done. It's very nicely done. But at the back of your mind, you are thinking about times when you've seen that done better. You are thinking of Freddy's resurrection in The Dream Master. You're thinking a little bit of Frank's resurrection in Hellraiser, except it's done on such a low budget, bless them, that it looks like Freddy's resurrection or Frank's resurrection if either of them had been resurrected in a Duran Duran video. There's a lot of music video aesthetic to this, and that's kind of where it falls down. I can't help but get the impression that this was maybe meant as a calling card for bigger and better things, but the simple, bald truth is it looks cheap. It looks made for TV in the worst sense of what that meant back in the 90s. TV shows have enormous budgets now, but everything's so lit. You can see everything. There are no shadows. There are no darkness, which would have hidden a multitude of sins. Just throw some shadows around, rather than you've got your character standing. He literally will appear in corners of rooms, but rooms that are so well lit that it's, oh, there's the dude standing in the corner, rather than have a shadow that he can come out of, a darkness that he can come out of. And if your sets are dark, then they don't look as cheap as they do when you throw halogen bulbs all over them. You remember how in the 90s, how TV shows would set dress an alleyway or a junkie's den to make it look dirty, and it was a very clean looking dirty. It was a very precise dirty. All the rubbish had been placed in precise places, and some graffiti had been put on the wall, and things had been left out, and it looked like a theatre set. It looked like a stage rather than an actual environment. Everything here, even the dirty environments, look clean dirty, a clean kind of dirty, a staged dirty. So the aesthetic throughout the entire film is one of falseness. There's no reality to it. The pictures that you see, you don't feel it's the real world. It all seems like some kind of faked TV land that this is happening in. And it boggles the mind that why they didn't keep some of it in the dark. It would have added to the feel. it would have added to the terror and the tone, and it would have hidden an awful lot of the cheapness. It's not very bloody, and again, I think that's why I get the feeling that maybe this film was intended as a calling card for the director rather than to be an out and out horror movie, because as with a few well-placed shadows, I think a few well-placed squibs and of blood, a little bit more of the red stuff. I mean, this is an 18 certificate movie, but only for a couple of very brief reasons. If they wanted to commit to that certification, I think a little bit of blood thrown around could have hidden an awful lot of the cracks in this as well, because God knows, and call me hypocritical, but horror fans, myself included, will forgive a film an awful lot if it delivers on the gore. Sometimes we want really thoughtful, artistic, layered horror movies like The Exorcist, like Babadook, like Hunger. Sometimes we just want a gore fest. Sometimes we just want to put Peter Jackson's Brain Dead on and see the blood and splatter fly. And there's nothing wrong with that. But this film goes for the artsy but has nothing to say, because it's a magpie picking all of the jewels from other films, and feels because of that it's too good to go down the exploitation route and be really gory, which is a shame because there's a fun film in here. One thing I will say in the film's favour, because it's not awful, don't go out of your way to check it out, but you won't be offended by it. It'll just seem a little bit like a Jive Bunny mega mix of lots of other films that you've already seen and enjoy more than this one. But there's a lullaby in this which plays a part and plays over the end credits. And if you go on the IMDb message boards for this, about a third to half of the threads are all about what the hell's that song. It's called Sleep Baby Sleep. I'll try and link to another YouTuber who's put the song up. I think they've just held a microphone to the TV screen, because it's not available anywhere, and it is creepy as hell. They should have had more of that vibe, more of the lullaby and that kind of stuff, because there's something here. I just don't think that the creators wanted to dig too hard to get to what was there at the center of this story. I just think they wanted to put a horror film out, and well, that's a mission accomplished, I suppose. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, why not? Come, stay, look at the other videos. I've just hit 150, so I will be putting together 150 subscriber giveaway. It might not be the next video, but I'll let you know when that's up and running, and I'll leave it running for a good few weeks. So yeah, tell your friends. Grumpy Andrew, subscribe, come along. He's going to be giving shit away soon.